At a university campus, a female student had just finished attending a party and was heading back to her dorm when suddenly, she was struck and knocked down by a car from behind. The driver quickly got out to check if she was okay, and to her shock, it turned out to be one of the university professors. The student insisted she wasn't seriously hurt, but the professor's expression suddenly changed. What she thought was just an accident turned out to be something far more sinister. Without warning, the professor forced the girl into the trunk of his car and quietly drove her to a secret lab on campus. It turned out he had been conducting some highly unethical experiments behind closed doors, trying to develop a serum that could bring the dead back to life. Recently, he had made some promising breakthroughs. To test his progress, he targeted students at the university. The girl wasn't the only unfortunate victim. Inside the lab, a failed experiment was locked away. A person who looked seriously disturbed, clearly mutated in some unnatural way. The professor soon began his second round of testing. He injected the serum directly into the girl's body. But after waiting anxiously, nothing happened. The professor lost his temper on the spot, cursing and swearing. He insisted this couldn't be true because the serum had been improved and logically shouldn't fail this time. Just as the professor was about to give up in frustration and start cleaning up the scattered papers on the floor, he looked up, and to his shock, the female student was gone from the hospital bed. Could it be that the experiment had actually worked? As he quietly allowed himself a small moment of hope, the next second, the zombified girl suddenly lunged at him from behind. With the professor falling to the ground, the zombie burst out of the lab and unleashed chaos across the campus. No one was safe, not the librarian quietly working late, nor the athletes training in the gym. The infection spread quickly and mercilessly, but the horror didn't stop there. The zombified professor himself broke free from the campus and appeared near a nearby restaurant. After a long, busy day, the chef had finally stepped out back for a quick bite. Before he even had time to react, he saw a strange figure approaching and was bitten on the arm. Panicked, the chef ran back inside and told the waitstaff about the biting madman outside. Seeing the severity of the wound, one of the servers immediately called the police, while the chef returned to work, trying to keep calm amidst the growing tension. A woman dining in the restaurant noticed the bloodstain on the chef's sleeve and asked what had happened. When the server explained the situation, Alex, a scientist working in the National Security Agency's biochemical division, immediately realized this was far more serious than a simple attack. Sure enough, when Alex arrived in the kitchen, she found the chef collapsed on the floor, convulsing violently. The confused waiter immediately stepped forward to check on him. But just as Alex tried to stop him, the chef suddenly mutated and lunged at her. After a fierce struggle, Alex managed to take down the zombie. The police arrived soon after. The bitten waiter was rushed into an ambulance, accompanied by Alex's colleague, Ellis. The two of them frequently handled biochemical emergencies like this. To prevent the injured from mutating further, Alex and Ellis decided to personally escort the patient. But what they didn't expect was that the waiter started mutating before they even reached the hospital. With no other choice, Ellis had to put him down. Afterward, the two returned to headquarters, only to hear from their superior that an even worse biochemical outbreak had erupted at the university not far from the restaurant. To get to the bottom of the outbreak, Alex and Ellis were immediately assigned a high-priority mission. They had to head to the school, investigate the virus's origin, retrieve the original virus sample to aid vaccine research, and rescue as many survivors as possible. The orders were strict and ruthless. If the mission wasn't completed by dawn, explosives would be deployed at 7 a.m. to completely destroy the school, stopping the virus from spreading any further. To make sure everything went flawlessly, their superior assigned a battle-hardened Special Forces team to accompany them. The team was led by Colonel Dalton, a seasoned and fearless leader. With time running out, the entire group had no choice but to set off immediately. Soon, they reached the outskirts of the university and prepared to move deeper on foot. Not long after they started, a lone zombie appeared, slowly shuffling toward them. Though the soldiers were experienced fighters, none of them had ever faced zombies before, and tension filled the air. As the team leader, Dalton didn't hesitate. Without a second thought, he pulled out his pistol and fired 2 shots, taking the zombie down. But just as he was about to finish it off with a final shot, Ellis stopped him. Alex wanted to collect a blood sample to see if this was the original strain of the virus. Unfortunately, tests showed it was a 3rd-generation zombie, no longer useful for research. Still, the team couldn't help but notice its razor-sharp teeth. This meant the virus was evolving, becoming more dangerous. After neutralizing the zombie, the group pressed onward. Suddenly, another zombie appeared out of nowhere, terrifying one soldier so much he collapsed to the ground. Another soldier quickly aimed his weapon, but the zombie struck fast, knocking the gun from his hand. With no choice left, he engaged the creature in close combat. The others, fearing friendly fire, hesitated to shoot. Thanks to his agility, the soldier managed to take down the zombie with his bare hands. But unfortunately, his palm was grazed by the zombie's sharp teeth. At first, it seemed like just a minor scratch, not a big deal. But Alex immediately grew tense. She knew that even a tiny wound could lead to infection. To stop the virus from spreading, Dalton ordered the soldier to be restrained on the spot. Without hesitation, he drew his long knife and amputated the soldier's arm right then and there. Unfortunately, it was too late. The soldier mutated instantly and bit the medic nearby. Seeing this, Ellis had no choice but to pull the trigger. Before even entering the campus proper, the team had already lost 2 soldiers, and they knew it was only going to get worse. The school gates were a mess, surrounded by an eerie, lifeless silence that sent chills down their spines. To save time, Dalton decided to split the team into 2 groups. Bart took 2 female teammates, Henson and Rodriguez, to search the dormitories for survivors, while the rest went to hunt for the virus's origin and recover the original sample. As Bart and his group stepped into the dorms, they immediately found a corpse in the hallway. Bart, a seasoned veteran and notorious for his love of valuables, didn't even miss the wedding ring on the dead man's finger. They pushed further upstairs, and what they saw was horrifying. Limbs and body parts were scattered all over the stairwell. The rookie, Rodriguez, couldn't hold it together and immediately vomited, overwhelmed by the gruesome scene. Meanwhile, Ellis and the others arrived at the library, where from a distance they spotted a student, still diligently studying, despite everything going on. Griffin immediately assumed this was a survivor and moved forward to check it out. O'Connor warned him to be careful, noting something was off about the student. But Griffin was confident, joking, "Relax, zombies don't read books." As he got closer, however,
"Come on, kid."
Thankfully, Ellis arrived just in time and shot the zombie dead. Griffin, frustrated, even fired off a few rounds at the corpse to vent his anger. But when he turned around, the mutated librarian, ever dedicated to his role, reminded them not to disturb the students' reading. Ellis had no choice but to pull the trigger again. Alex quickly took a blood sample for analysis and discovered this was a second-generation zombie. They were getting closer to the original virus strain, but it still wasn't useful for their research. So the group pressed on, heading deeper into the basement. Meanwhile, Griffin, trailing at the back, suddenly heard noises upstairs. Convinced it was another survivor, he decided to investigate. Dalton ordered him to ignore it and keep moving forward, but Griffin refused to obey. At that moment, the noise came again. When Griffin turned around, the rest of the team had vanished. You really have to feel for Griffin. While everyone else just wanted to grab the virus sample and get out of there, he was the only one focused solely on rescuing survivors. He broke away from the group and followed the sound. Opening a door, he found a shy woman crouched in the corner. But, as you might expect, kind-hearted Griffin had walked right into a zombie trap again. Luckily, he was incredibly tough and managed to fight off the zombie with sheer brute force. Just as he bent down to pick up a weapon and make his escape, the zombie lunged at him once more. After a fierce struggle, Griffin finally managed to trap the creature inside the room. Listening to it banging relentlessly on the door, shaken but relieved, he prepared to run. But then, he turned and was in for another shock. Meanwhile, back in the dormitory, the other 3 heard noises coming from a nearby room. When they kicked the door open, they were greeted by the sight of a naked zombie inside, and a mutilated man's corpse lying on the bed. Without hesitation, Henson took down the zombie. Bart, however, handed her a camera. This guy wasn't just greedy, he was a total pervert. Even the zombie girl wasn't spared, as he tried to take a selfie with her. His creepy behavior left both women utterly stunned. When Henson refused to help with the photos, Bart just started taking selfies on his own. But Rodriguez, ever the observant one, noticed something odd. The door was locked from the inside. How could the woman have been infected? Just as the two were puzzled, Bart suddenly yelped. He'd been bitten by a mosquito. That's when it clicked. The woman must have been infected by the mosquito. Bart didn't want to accept the truth, but it was clear something was off with him. Maybe because the virus load from the mosquito was small, he hadn't mutated right away. Henson decided to leave Bart behind, letting him face whatever was coming on his own. But Bart wasn't having it. Greedy and lecherous as he was obviously afraid of dying. The tension between them quickly escalated. Seeing the situation turn against him, Bart pulled out a bombshell. He offered them $1 million to take him back with them. It turned out he'd secretly been working with a pharmaceutical company, with the same goal of getting the original virus sample. The company promised him a huge payout, which the three of them would split. Their plan was to develop a vaccine from the virus, patent it to gain a monopoly, and then sell it at a premium. The offer sounded tempting, and Rodriguez immediately lowered her weapon. Bart thought his plan had worked. He swaggered over to Henson, full of confidence. But little did he know, she was only pretending. After knocking Bart out, the two tied him to a radiator pipe. Though thoughtfully, they gave him a pistol, at least letting him choose how he wanted to go. Then they headed back to the parking lot to report the situation to their superiors. But to their shock, the driver had also been attacked by zombies. While he managed to survive, his radio was damaged, cutting off all contact with headquarters. Clearly shaken, the driver even forgot to warn them that there was a zombie in the car. By the time Henson noticed, it was already too late. Rodriguez had unknowingly opened the car door. Although Henson quickly dealt with the zombie, she couldn't save Rodriguez. Refusing to become a monster, Rodriguez begged Henson to put her out of her misery. Meanwhile, Alex and the others had reached the basement, only to realize Griffin hadn't made it. There was no time to dwell on that, because the other side of the basement was swarming with zombies. They were locked behind a fence, clearly secured on purpose. Two campus security guards lay dead on the ground, and it became obvious they had sacrificed themselves to lock the zombies in. No wonder the group had only encountered a few zombies along the way. The rest had been contained here all along. The zombies grew increasingly agitated as the team approached, and Ellis quickly suggested they retreat before the fence gave way. But no sooner had they started to move than one of the guards lying on the ground suddenly mutated. Dalton, walking at the back, didn't notice in time and was ambushed, bitten hard on the shoulder. In the chaos, Ellis took a precise shot, helping Dalton kill the attacking zombie. Unfortunately, it was too late. Dalton was already infected. He insisted he was fine, but his body began convulsing uncontrollably. Just before he fully transformed, Alex ended his suffering with a single mercy shot. The captain's death shattered O'Connor, but they couldn't linger. The zombies were moments away from breaking through the fence. As they turned to escape, they were met with an even worse sight. The exit was swarmed with zombies, clearly drawn by the gunfire. With no way out, the three made a desperate decision to turn back inside, only to watch as the zombies trapped behind the fence broke free. Surrounded and out of options, they had no choice but to fight head-on. Alex and Ellis unleashed everything they had, guns blazing. But O'Connor hadn't fired a single shot before a zombie caught him off guard. Without a chance to react, he was devoured on the spot. Outnumbered and outgunned, Alex and Ellis soon found themselves trapped, the horde closing in from all sides inside a narrow corridor. In a desperate moment, Alex spotted an electrical panel on the wall and immediately came up with a plan. Just as the horde of zombies closed in, she and Ellis scrambled up to the overhead pipes. Alex first used a lighter to trigger the fire sprinklers. Then, with a single shot, she destroyed the electrical panel. Instantly, electricity surged through the metal pipes, electrocuting every zombie below. With the crisis averted, the two finally reached the source of the outbreak, the secret lab where the professor had been conducting his twisted experiments. There, they encountered a young couple who had managed to survive, armed with a pistol they'd taken from one of the campus security guards. From the students, Alex and Ellis learned that this very lab was ground zero for the virus outbreak, and that the deranged professor had been using students to research his resurrection serum. The couple revealed they had once been the professor's assistants, so they knew many of his dark secrets. They even exposed how the professor had stolen bodies from the morgue to fuel his experiments. Next, the young man led them to the door of the first test subject's containment room. It was clear that inside was the original zombie they had been desperately searching for. All that remained was to collect a blood sample. Because the female student had worked as an assistant, her fingerprints could easily unlock the door. The two cautiously stepped into the room, and just as the door shut behind them, Ellis acted decisively, delivering a sweeping leg kick that took down the zombie instantly. Alex quickly drew blood samples, and the instruments confirmed it. This was the original, first-generation zombie they'd been searching for. Just as they prepared to leave, disaster struck. A huge horde of zombies suddenly swarmed in, overwhelming the unsuspecting young couple who had been with them. Worse still, Ellis got distracted and lost control, ending up pinned under a pile of zombies. As Alex drew her pistol to shoot, Ellis fired his own gun first, using it to free himself. When the two finally emerged, a gruesome scene awaited them. The poor students were being devoured by the ravenous zombies. Thankfully, the creatures were so focused on their meal that they didn't notice Alex and Ellis slipping quietly away. But outside, the situation was even worse. Zombies were everywhere. With no other option, Alex and Ellis had to fight their way through. Normally, anyone but the heroes wouldn't last more than 3 seconds in such an onslaught. But thanks to that classic protagonist luck, they barely came out with just a few dirted clothes, battered but still standing. Just then, Henson and the driver arrived in a car, arriving just in time to help Alex and Ellis break through the zombie horde. Alex managed to jump into the vehicle safely, but Ellis wasn't so lucky. He got tangled up in a large group of zombies. Even after the car started moving and he escaped the danger, the virus sample he was carrying was lost. All their hard work seemed to have gone up in smoke. But Ellis wasn't ready to give up. He insisted on returning to the lab to retrieve another sample. Breaking through the chaos wasn't easy, and Henson immediately objected. With zombies everywhere, and less than half an hour before the military planned to destroy the entire area, she thought it was too risky. Still, Ellis was determined. Without the sample, no vaccine could be developed, and the virus would continue spreading, leading to more deaths. Alex fully supported Ellis's decision. At this point, Henson had no choice but to follow along, even if reluctantly. This time, instead of taking the front entrance swarming with zombies, they planned to sneak in through the back door. Along the way, they ran into some zombified athletes, but managed to get through without serious harm. After crossing the sports field, the trio reached the locker rooms inside the gym, only to find zombies waiting there too. With the zombie horde closing in, the trio had no choice but to take shelter in a small room. But just as they shut the door, a zombie lunged out of the bathroom. Luckily, Henson reacted fast, raising her gun and taking it out with a single shot. Still, they were trapped. The door wouldn't hold for long, and the zombies outside were already pounding against it. That's when Ellis noticed the air duct in the bathroom. Unfortunately, after Alex checked it, she realized it couldn't be opened from the inside. Ellis made a decision. He would cross the locker room alone and open the duct from the other side. But how was he supposed to get past a room full of zombies? That's when inspiration struck. Ellis came up with a bold plan. He smeared zombie blood all over himself to mask his scent, hoping it would fool the undead. Once he was ready, Ellis took a deep breath and opened the door. Just as he'd hoped, the zombies didn't react. It turned out they really were hunting by smell. Step by step, Ellis moved through the crowd, completely unnoticed. He reached the other side of the room just as the zombies were about to break through the door behind Alex and Henson. In the nick of time, Ellis opened the vent, and just as the door burst open, zombies flooding in, Alex and Henson managed to crawl out to safety. After a grueling journey, the three finally reached the laboratory. The zombies that had once swarmed here were nowhere to be seen. But the young man who'd been bitten earlier suddenly transformed and attacked Henson. Alex reacted instantly, shooting the zombie dead. Just when they thought the worst was over, tragedy struck again. Unaware of a body lying behind her, Henson was suddenly ambushed by the mutated female student. This time, luck was not on her side. The gruesome bite marks on her thigh left no hope. Her fate was sealed. After quickly collecting blood samples from the bodies, the two urged Henson to leave. Though filled with sorrow, they knew there was no other choice. They had to walk away, tears in their eyes. On the way back, they were confronted by yet another massive horde of zombies. With their guns empty, they had no option but to fight hand to hand. Even with their hero's luck, they couldn't hold back the overwhelming numbers. Before long, Alex was swallowed by the undead swarm, leaving only Ellis struggling to break through and escape. At the same moment, a missile from the military rained down from the sky, instantly destroying the entire building. Ellis, having narrowly escaped, was preparing to leave when he spotted the driver's body on the ground. But something was off. The driver hadn't been killed by zombies. Instead, he'd been shot. Before Ellis could make sense of it, Bart suddenly appeared, gun in hand. To everyone's shock, Bart was still alive, and cruelly had just shot his own comrade. It turned out, in his desperate bid to survive, Bart had sacrificed one of his own hands. But he was clearly on the brink of mutating himself, showing signs of becoming a zombie. Even knowing his time was running out, Bart threatened Ellis, demanding the virus sample so he could cash in with the pharmaceutical company. Unarmed and facing a gun, Ellis had no choice but to comply. But Bart had no intention of letting Ellis walk away. Just as he raised his weapon, a gunshot rang out, and Bart collapsed to the ground. It was Alex, alive and firing to save Ellis. How she survived was a mystery even to Ellis. Frankly, I was stunned too. Even in his final moments, Bart tried to take them down with him. Though Ellis and Alex survived once again, the virus sample was lost again. And now, with the entire school reduced to rubble by the missile strike, their mission had become impossible. Left with no other choice, they found a car and slammed their foot on the gas, speeding away from what had once been a place full of hope and was now nothing more than a wasteland. But destroying the school didn't stop the virus from spreading. The entire city had already been overrun by zombies. And when you think about it, if even mosquitoes can spread the virus, then the real question is, would a vaccine even matter?